Hey everybody, Ben Fetzer, Advanced Microbial Professionals, Part 2, Crawl Spaces. Going to talk today about how to prevent mold long term in crawl spaces. I wanted to go back to the construction element of crawl spaces. In the previous video, I talked about how they built houses in, say, 50s, 60s era of construction in the Midwest, and they did the crawl space method because it was a less expensive option compared to a full-blown basement foundation. And one thing I left out, a modern day application of crawl spaces and how they're being used and built today is mostly in the renovation space. They still do full-blown crawl spaces in new construction, but oftentimes it's when someone is adding on a room to the back of the house. They're renovating and just wanting to expand the size of the square feet of their home. And so they'll do that using a crawl space. And that's not super uncommon. Same reason, I think, just because it's a little less expensive. It's a little less difficult, too, if you think of needing to get into the back of the property, going into the backyard with big equipment, and you're going to dig a 6-foot basement and do a bunch of pouring foundation walls. That's a lot. You might not even have the room anymore to get a big excavator back there and trucks and everything else. So it's possibly not even a reasonable thing to do in some of these neighborhoods and some of these backyards. So nonetheless, they'll use a crawl space. They'll go ahead and they'll pour the wall, concrete wall, to support this new space, this new addition, and they will go ahead and install the support joists, build the structure above it, and they will have this crawl space underneath their new addition. So just throwing that out there. Now let's talk about like the two different areas where we're trying to control air and humidity. One is the floor of the crawl space. The second would be the parameter or the rim joist of the crawl space. The rim joist is where they used to put the vents. They would cut a hole and they would bring air into your crawl space. That is the piece of wood that supports the parameter of the floor joist system. And structural wood, usually a 2x10 or 2x12 piece of wood, and it just goes along the parameter. There's all these air gaps below that board and on all four sides of that board where the cavities exist, and the support joists and the floor joists and the rim joists meet. Anyway, there's just air gaps, so you seal those by using foam insulation. Caulking is another option. Depending on the size of the gaps, one might be a smarter option than the other, but the main thing is we're trying to avoid air from being able to push into the crawl space from outside. We're making it airtight. And the other bonus, insects are not going to be able to come in the crawl space through those little gaps as well. So we want to seal those gaps, either with your foam insulation or a high quality caulking product. And you go throughout the parameter of the rim joist and you seal all those gaps. There's going to be wires and pipes that are inserted through the rim joist as well, supplying, say, refrigerant for your air conditioner, or it could be a discharge pipe on the plumbing side, etc., etc. Oftentimes there's the need for a sump pump as well in the crawl space, so they may have a discharge pipe that goes through the rim joist, leaving a gap around where they drilled the hole in the wood and inserted the pipe. If that doesn't get sealed, foam needs to be used to seal it so that insects don't come through and air doesn't come through. So that's your parameter, that's your rim joist. All that needs to be airtight. Then the second goal we have, or the second area where we want to make the crawl space airtight, is the floor of the crawl space, which is dirt or gravel. And imagine just trying to keep humidity under control when you're dealing with the earth. Like, that's just not going to happen. You need to somehow create a barrier between the earth and the space you're trying to control humidity in, the actual crawl space. So one method that I use is heavy duty plastic, 10 mil, maybe even heavier, depending on the application. And you're going to actually cut these sections of plastic sheeting, seam them and overlay them so that you have a continuous sheet of plastic across the floor of the crawl space, so that there is absolutely no air that's going to be able to come through and affect the humidity in the crawl space. So once you've got a complete sheet, you're going to then run that sheet up the foundation wall and fasten it somehow to the foundation wall. Glue, or I should say spray adhesive, heavy duty tape, butyl tape, sticks really well and bonds really well to concrete. Sometimes it makes sense to actually take a piece of 1x and nail it every few inches across the parameter of the foundation wall to fasten it against the foundation wall. That makes it really, really heavy duty, and it's going to hold it in place very well. But however it's done, it needs to seal, and it needs to seal and bond to the concrete, meaning that plastic sheeting is fastened to the concrete, and that's going to keep all air from being able to come through plastic and then affect the actual crawl space. So your goal, just airtight. You want an airtight bond between the crawl space itself and the soil below it. Hopefully that makes sense. So we've addressed those two main areas, the floor, which creates a bunch of humidity, and the parameter around the foundation wall, your rim joist, which can be a source of air coming through and from the outside into the actual crawl space. So once you get both of those two areas airtight, now all you got to do is just keep the humidity from, getting high, which is a lot easier because now you're not fighting against the elements. So there's two ways. You can use your HVAC system. You can supply air to the crawl space by bringing a pipe over, or a diffuser / register, and you're pumping air into the crawl space. The only problem is that it's hard to get a return in that crawl space usually. So you're just doing supplied air, you're not doing return air. That doesn't always work out, and it might be counterproductive, and you might be better off just doing a dehumidifier, installing a dehumidifier permanently that's connected to a humidistat. The humidistat senses the humidity, and once you set it to say 55%, it's going to kick on and start dehumidifying the air and keeping that air from getting any higher, and so now you've got humidity control by virtue of a dehumidification piece of equipment, a dehumidifier. So that's a pretty good method to use. I've seen a lot of really good success with the encapsulation method, complete air seal around the crawl space, and then controlling the humidity with your dehumidifier or multiple dehumidifiers. That's it. A really good step in the right direction. If there's tweaks and things you want to do differently because it's not quite enough dehumidification, so you need more dehumidifiers, you can make those adjustments. But I've seen a lot of success with the method that I just described. So if there's any other questions, you can definitely just reach out to me. moldkc.org, Advanced Microbial Professionals. Look us up. We'd be glad to help. Good luck with your crawl space.